the Pope received secret reports of ancient ruins found beneath an old European village. The Pope traveled personally to verify the rumors before the matter spread. The Pope arrived at the excavation site surrounded by frightened villagers. A local elder explained that workers found tunnels older than any known kingdom. The Pope ordered the workers to open the tunnel further for inspection. As the tunnel widened, strange, perfectly smooth walls began to appear. Workers uncovered carved pathways, showing extreme age but advanced construction. The Pope descended deeper, noticing the architecture was unlike any medieval design. The passage opened into a vast chamber supported by massive stone pillars. The Pope found human footprints preserved in hardened mud far below the monastery level. The prints clearly belonged to people who lived thousands of generations earlier. The Pope ordered the guards to clear a deeper path through the chamber. Another tunnel emerged, narrower and colder than the previous one. Deep inside, they discovered tools made by an unknown ancient civilization. The Pope recognized immediately that these artifacts predated all recorded human history. A second chamber revealed human skeletons buried far deeper than expected layers. The skeletons showed signs of advanced craftsmanship in their worn ornaments. The Pope realized their discovery challenged the entire Church's timeline of humanity. The Pope immediately sealed the tunnels and forbade the villagers from speaking. The Pope decided he would hide this truth at all costs, even if it meant a new war. A royal messenger secretly reported to the king that the Pope had sealed ancient tunnels beneath a village. The king dismissed the court and kept only a few loyal guards to hear the secret. The messenger described the sealed tunnels and the Pope's strict silence over the discovery. Troubled, the king summoned his high priest to judge the danger of such a discovery. In private, the high priest confirmed rumors of tunnels far older than any kingdom or scripture. The king decided he must see the forbidden tunnels with his own eyes before trusting the Pope. That night, the king departed the castle with a small, trusted escort toward the distant village. The king reached the village and saw heavy barriers over the entrances to the tunnels. The king questioned the villagers about what lay beneath their homes. Against the Pope's orders, the king commanded the guards to unseal the entrance for him. The king descended into the tunnels, following the same path the Pope had taken before. He reached the vast chamber of pillars and felt its impossible age around him. The king examined the ancient footprints and tools that proved a forgotten civilization had thrived here. The high priest quietly suggested that such evidence could shake both crown and church. The king began to see the discovery as a weapon that could either protect or destroy his rule. Back at the surface, the king ordered the tunnels guarded by his own men alongside the Pope's soldiers. Quietly, the king began selecting officers he believed would stay loyal if conflict ever arose. The high priest urged caution, warning that open struggle with the Pope could divide the realm. The king nevertheless prepared secret drills, planning to move before the Pope could. In his heart, the king chose to risk war rather than let the ancient truth belong to the Church alone. After hearing of the king's interference, the Pope returned to the Holy City in angry silence. In the Vatican halls, the Pope summoned the high priest to plan a response to the king. Behind closed doors, they agreed that the king must never control the ruins. The Pope ordered a secret network of church agents to watch every road to the village. Messengers rode out from the Holy City to quietly replace local priests with loyal ones. In the village, the new priests began steering sermons toward obedience and fear of secrets. Church guards quietly questioned villagers who spoke too freely about the ruins. Some villagers tried to flee, but church riders were waiting on the roads. In the Holy City, the Pope created a special tribunal to judge anything related to the ruins. The tribunal decreed that any mention of older civilizations was to be treated as dangerous heresy. Orders went out to remove ancient objects from monasteries that might support the new discovery. The Pope secretly sent trusted archivists to bury certain items where no one could read them. At the same time, the king's spies slipped into the city to learn what the church was hiding. Some spies watched as chests were carried from hidden vaults toward unknown destinations. The king's agents realized the church was destroying or hiding all traces of older ages. In response, the king quietly increased his own patrols around the village and the sealed tunnels. The Pope learned of these movements and feared the king might seize the ruins outright. That night, the Pope and High Priest agreed to form a secret order tasked only with guarding the truth. This silent order trained to move unseen between church and crown, loyal only to the hidden history. As church and crown tightened their secret preparations, the ancient ruins waited silently beneath them both. The king's spies returned from the holy city with fragments of what they had seen. They reported that the church was moving hidden chests and training a silent new order. In the royal castle, the king listened to his officers as they described the secret order. The king ordered his spies not to attack, but to shadow the church's new warriors. Meanwhile, the Pope tasked the silent order to trace any hidden path back to the king. The silent order fanned out along the roads, watching for unusual riders or messages. Near the village, the king's spies and the church's silent order began to cross each other's paths. Both sides suspected each other, but kept their distance, waiting for a mistake. One night, a church agent followed a spy who slipped away from the tavern too quickly. The spy passed coded news to another agent, unaware the church was watching from above. The king's officers realized that too much movement near the village risked exposing their plans. The king ordered his spies to pull back and watch from farther away, leaving fewer traces. The silent order noticed the sudden quiet and suspected the king was planning something larger. In the holy city, the Pope demanded that the silent order tighten control over anyone who had seen the ruins. Agents quietly revisited the village families, checking who still whispered about the tunnels. Some villagers, terrified, began denying they had ever seen anything beneath their homes. The king's spies, still watching from the hills, noted how heavily the church now controlled the village. From the holy city, the Pope sent word that if the king moved first, the church would answer without hesitation. The silent order and the king's spies now watched each other from shadows, neither side striking first. As both powers watched and waited, the ancient tunnels remained closed, storing a truth neither side would share. Rumors spread that the king and the Pope would finally meet near the village to settle control of the ruins. The king rode out with his finest guard, determined not to bow before the church. From the holy city, the Pope traveled with his own procession, refusing to show weakness. The high priest rode ahead to prepare a neutral ground where neither side could claim advantage. Church and royal banners were planted at equal distance, signaling an uneasy balance of power. The king's army formed a living wall of steel behind their masked ruler. On the other side, the Pope's guards and the silent order stood ready in strict silence. At last, the king and the Pope moved toward the center, each refusing to step closer than the other. Neither man could see the other's eyes, but both studied every movement for weakness. The king offered to share the ruins if the church would admit their history was wrong. The Pope rejected any public change to doctrine, insisting the ruins remain buried and silent. The high priest stepped forward, suggesting a secret agreement, the truth guarded by both sides. The king refused to hide everything, demanding controlled excavation under royal oversight. The Pope, unwilling to bend, hinted that the faith of millions could turn against the crown. For a moment, it seemed swords might be drawn, and battle would begin above the buried city. Instead, the high priest proposed a fragile compromise. The tunnels would remain sealed for now. Both sides agreed that any digging would require joint presence, though neither trusted the other. Before leaving, the king warned that he would not wait forever if the church stalled again. The Pope watched the royal banners recede, resolved to tighten his own inner circle even further. Between crown and church, an uneasy peace settled, for now while the ancient ruins waited for the next move. Under fragile truce, crown and church agreed to open the tunnels together for a controlled excavation. The king and the Pope each chose a small team of men to descend together beneath the earth. Both leaders moved down toward the wooden gate, their chosen men gathering behind them. Under their combined orders, workers began removing the heavy beams that sealed the entrance. When the last boards fell aside, a cold breath of air escaped from the dark passage. Torches were lit and passed from hand to hand until the first ranks glowed orange in the gloom. Together, royal soldiers and church guards descended into the same stone corridor first discovered by the villagers. They entered the great pillar hall again, this time with both banners waiting far above their heads. The joint team carefully followed the preserved footprints and markers the Pope had seen before. Led by memory, the Pope gestured toward the side passage where tools and skeletons had been found. The group entered the narrower chambers where the ancient bones and ornaments still lay undisturbed. Royal and churchmen argued silently, with gestures over how much earth to remove around the skeletons. When part of the wall crumbled, it revealed a deeper crack, leading even further underground. The king wanted to widen the crack immediately, but the Pope feared the chambers might collapse. A shower of dust and small stones from above forced everyone to retreat a few steps. Reluctantly, the king agreed to reinforce the chamber before digging deeper into the crack. On the surface, joint patrols grew more common, even as each side continued its own secret signals. The high priest quietly instructed the silent order to mark any royal officer who seemed too curious. Deep below, beams now held the roof, and the crack waited like a thin black line into older darkness. As night fell, the first joint dig ended with more questions than answers, and both powers planned what to do next. At dawn, the joint team returned to the reinforced chamber to test the crack again. Royal and church engineers argued with gestures over how to widen the crack without collapse. The king and the Pope arrived together to personally authorize deeper work. Under their combined gaze, the chosen workers began carefully chiseling along the edges of the fissure. After hours of slow strikes, the crack widened into a jagged opening deep enough to swallow torchlight. A tossed stone fell longer than expected, echoing from an unseen level far below. Engineers ordered ropes and ladders brought down so someone could test the depth safely. The king insisted his men go first, while the Pope demanded the silent order lead the descent. At last they agreed. Pairs of royal soldiers and church guards would descend together, tied to the same rope. The first pair climbed down slowly, boots searching the unseen wall as torches swung above them. At the bottom, they found a flat stone platform opening into another, even larger corridor. They tugged the rope 3 times, and more pairs descended until a full team stood on the lower level. The king and the Pope decided they too must see this lower level, despite their guards' unease. Slowly, their cloaks swinging like shadows against the stone on the lower floor, They saw architecture unlike anything in their own cities, built on a far larger scale. They found rows of stone benches and channels in the floor, hinting at long-vanished gatherings and waterworks. One soldier pointed out faint carvings that resembled stars and paths across the ceiling stones. The high priest urged retreat, fearing that more knowledge would tear apart both throne and altar. Reluctantly, the king agreed to withdraw for the day, leaving guards posted at both levels. Back on the surface, both sides knew the lower depths had changed the game, yet the crack leading onward remained sealed in darkness. That night, one royal soldier could not sleep, his mind trapped in the silent halls beneath the hill. He wrapped his cloak around him and slipped quietly between sleeping comrades toward the camp edge. At the outer line, he passed a drowsy sentry who barely noticed him in the darkness. On the slope, he saw a church guard, also awake, staring uneasily toward the dark hill. Without speaking, they exchanged a brief look, and the soldier continued alone toward the sealed gate. At the entrance, only a few guards watched the gate, their attention drifting between the camps. He tossed a small stone downhill, drawing 2 guards away from the gate to investigate the noise. When their backs were turned, he slid down the dirt and slipped through a partly loosened plank. Inside, he lit a torch from a still glowing ember and began descending the familiar upper shaft. He stepped again into the great pillar hall, now emptier and colder than during the joint dig. Crossing the hall, he found the reinforced chamber and the ropes still hanging down to the lower level. Determined, he climbed down alone to the lower platform where the day's guards had stood. He walked deeper into the lower corridor, following the channels and benches under his flickering torch. In one section, he found narrow doorways and alcoves, like simple rooms carved from the stone. On the dusty floors, he noticed small and large footprints layered over each other from ages past. Nearby, he saw deep grooves in the floor where heavy things had been dragged again and again. Suddenly, he heard the faint sound of rope and boots from the shaft above and hurried to hide. A small patrol from the Silent Order checked the lower level, then turned back without noticing him. Realizing neither side should fully control what he had seen, the soldier resolved to keep some truths to himself. By dawn, he had slipped back into camp, looking like any tired soldier as leaders planned the next official descent. At sunrise, the king gathered his closest officers to discuss what they had seen in the lower halls. He dismissed most of them, keeping only a few men he trusted to speak freely. With gestures, he ordered them to quietly replace church guards near the hill whenever possible. He also made clear that if war came, the deeper city would serve the crown before the church. In the church camp, the Pope met with the high priest and senior clergy to protect doctrine. They agreed to preach unity while secretly tightening control over anyone who had seen the lower level. The high priest sent the Silent Order to find out if anyone had gone below without permission. That night, the Silent Order watched the gate and counted every step that passed near it. They noticed footprints and smudged dirt that did not match the day's official patrols. Questioning guards with gestures, they learned someone had been seen moving alone in the dark. Rumors spread quietly that a foolish soldier had risked both crown and church by going below alone. In the royal council, the king planned a separate entrance that would reach the lower halls from another direction. Secretly, royal miners were sent into the nearby woods to search for another natural shaft. From a distance, church watchers noticed unusual digging and grew suspicious of the crown's intentions. Tension spiked when a church patrol and a royal patrol met at the forest edge, neither willing to yield the path. The high priest arrived just in time, forcing both sides to step back without drawing weapons. In separate meetings, the king and the pope each resolved to move faster before the other could. That evening, the silent order quietly marked certain tents for closer watch, including some of the king's men. The soldier who had gone below alone sensed eyes on him, but kept his face as blank as any other man's. As both sides sharpened their secret plans, the lower city waited, knowing the next descent would not be as united as the first. At first light, both camps prepared for what all knew might be the last joint descent. Among the chosen men was the same soldier who had secretly visited the lower halls. The king and the pope walked out together from opposite sides of the valley, each followed by their chosen escort. On the hillside, the high priest oversaw the exchange of outer sentries for men loyal only to the deepest secrecy. Under the three masked figures, the planks of the gate were pulled aside again, opening the way below. Torches were lit and distributed. Once again, a mixed vanguard advanced into the upper tunnel. They crossed the great pillar hall quickly, the soldiers' steps echoing between ancient columns. They descended again to the lower platform, where fresh guards had watched all night. Guided by the grooves and benches, they advanced farther than before into the lower halls. At last, they reached a massive stone wall where the grooves ended, as if something huge had once blocked the passage. The king signaled for his men to break through, trusting stone and beams above would hold. After a tense pause, they compromised. Only the joints around the edge would be cleared, not the whole wall. As stones loosened, thin gaps appeared, revealing only more darkness and a surprisingly strong, cool draft. Through one side gap, the soldier glimpsed an even larger chamber descending in terraces beyond their torches. The high priest abruptly insisted they stop, claiming the structure itself warned them to turn back. After long, silent gestures, they agreed to re-block the gaps for now using stronger braces on this level. As they withdrew, the soldier quietly brushed dust from the floor, marking in his mind where the new depths lay. Back on the lower platform, crown and church left alternating guards, each side watching the other's sentries. On the surface, the king and the pope parted without bowing, each certain the other would return in secret. Beneath kings and popes, the unseen terraces of the older city waited in the dark, untouched and patient.